July 25th, 1943. 5:42 a.m. The hills west of Nicosia, Sicily. The sky is turning from black to bruised purple, and the dust hasn't settled since yesterday's shelling. It hangs low over the olive groves like a second horizon. Sergeant Matteo Rinaldi wipes grit from his eyes and squints toward the valley road where American tanks are parked in a loose line, engines idling, waiting for orders that haven't come. He can hear them laughing. That's what unsettles him. The Americans had landed 10 days earlier. At first, the Italian officers told their men it would be a disaster for the invaders. The sea would swallow them. The Luftwaffe would shred them. The Axis line would hold. But the sea hadn't swallowed them. The sky hadn't saved them. And the line had not held. Rinaldi crouches behind a low stone wall, his Carcano rifle resting across the chipped limestone. Around him, his platoon of the 206th Coastal Division looks less like soldiers and more like farmers who've been handed uniforms and told to defend an island. Some are barefoot. One man has wrapped his feet in rags. Another clutches a rosary instead of ammunition. Across the valley, the Americans are methodical. Trucks move in steady columns. Bulldozers carve new tracks through fields that had been vineyards yesterday. Engineers lay down metal planking like they're building a road in peacetime. Rinaldi had been told Americans were soft, that they relied on gadgets and comfort, that they lacked discipline, that they would break when confronted by true European resolve. But soft men don't wake before dawn to repair bridges under artillery fire. Soft men don't laugh while shells land short and long and everywhere in between. By mid-morning, the American artillery begins. Not sporadic, not erratic, rhythmic, like a clock that measures destruction in seconds instead of hours. The first shell hits the ridge line 50 meters behind Rinaldi. The second lands precisely where the first would have sent men scrambling. The third arrives before anyone can fully process the second. It isn't wild bombardment. It's correction. Somewhere, someone is watching, calculating, adjusting. Rinaldi presses his face to the earth as the ground trembles. He thinks of the propaganda leaflets that described Americans as undisciplined. He thinks of the German liaison officer who had assured them that American industry could not possibly keep pace with Europe's martial tradition. Then he thinks of the trucks. So many trucks. They move like an endless caravan, bringing ammunition, fuel, food. Always food. Crates of it. Fresh bread. Canned fruit. Cigarettes. Chocolate. 2 days earlier, an Italian patrol had captured an American private who had wandered too far from his unit. The man had been terrified, yes, but well-fed. Clean. His boots were new. His uniform intact. In his pack, they found more rations than Rinaldi's squad had seen in a week. The private had said something through broken Italian and wild gestures. More coming. Always more. At the time, Rinaldi had assumed it was bravado. Now, watching the columns wind through the valley, he isn't so sure. By noon, the American infantry begins to advance. Not in dramatic waves. Not with shouted battle cries. They move in small groups, leapfrogging from stone wall to stone wall, covering each other with suppressive fire, so steady it feels less like gunshots and more like a continuous tearing of fabric. Behind them, tanks crawl forward, turrets scanning, engines roaring with a confidence that seems almost arrogant. Rinaldi fires once. He doesn't know if he hits anything. The return fire is immediate and overwhelming. Bullets chip stone from his cover, sending shards into his cheek. One of his men screams, and then goes silent. Within an hour, the ridge is untenable. An officer runs down the line shouting that they are to fall back to the next defensive position. The words feel hollow. They've already fallen back 3 times this week. Each new position lasts less time than the one before it. As they retreat, Rinaldi looks back and sees American engineers already climbing the ridge they've just abandoned. They aren't celebrating. They're measuring, marking, planning. He understands something then that he hadn't before. This isn't just an invasion. It's construction. The Americans aren't just breaking through lines. They're building their own behind them, faster than the defenders can destroy. 3 days later, Rinaldi's unit is cut off near a dried riverbed outside Enna. The Germans have pulled back without warning. Communication is gone. Ammunition is nearly gone. Water is gone. They can hear American loudspeakers in the distance, broadcasting in Italian. Soldati italiani. La guerra non è vostra. Lay down your weapons. You will be treated fairly. The message repeats. Some men curse. Some spit. Some stare at the ground. Rinaldi feels something he can't name. Not loyalty, exactly. Not fear. Something closer to exhaustion of belief. They had been told the Americans were weak. They had been told they would crumble. They had been told Europe was superior. But what he has seen is organization, abundance, relentless forward motion. By late afternoon, American units encircle the riverbed. A white flag appears at the edge of Rinaldi's line. No one knows who raised it. No one stops him. The Americans approach cautiously, rifles ready but not firing. An officer steps forward. He is young, sunburned, chewing gum. He speaks through an interpreter. You drop weapons. You walk forward. Hands up. You get water. Water. The word lands harder than artillery. Rinaldi sets down his rifle. His hands rise almost on their own. Around him, dozens of Italian soldiers do the same. There is no ceremony. No dramatic music. Just men surrendering because they can no longer pretend the story they were told matches the world in front of them. The Americans search them quickly, but without cruelty. They move them to a shaded area. Canteens are passed around. Someone hands Rinaldi a cigarette. He expects humiliation. Instead, he gets efficiency. They record his name, his unit, his rank. They mark it on a clipboard already thick with papers. There are so many prisoners that the Americans seem unsurprised by each new batch. Trucks arrive specifically configured for transport. Guards are assigned. Medical personnel move among the wounded, Italian and American alike. That night, in a temporary holding camp, Rinaldi listens to the low hum of generators powering floodlights that turn darkness into something manageable. He sees American soldiers eating hot meals from metal trays. He hears them complaining about the heat. Complaining and laughing. He thinks of the German officer who had once said, "The Americans fight with refrigerators." At the time, it had been a joke. Now it feels like analysis. Weeks later, on a ship bound for North Africa, Rinaldi sits among hundreds of other Italian prisoners. None are mistreated. They are processed, cataloged, fed. In quiet conversations below deck, a pattern emerges. Every man tells the same story. There were always more Americans, more trucks, more shells, more planes, more food, more fuel, more engineers. They didn't seem desperate. They didn't seem stretched thin. They didn't seem to gamble. They advanced like a tide, predictable, powerful, and impossible to argue with. In September, Italy signs an armistice. Rinaldi hears about it from an American guard who shrugs and says, "Guess you're on our side now." Just like that. Years later, historians will debate strategies, commanders, political decisions. They will analyze the failures of Axis coordination, the brilliance of Allied deception, the impact of air superiority. But Rinaldi will remember something simpler. He will remember the trucks. He will remember the artillery that adjusted after every shot. He will remember surrendering and being handed water instead of a rifle butt. And he will remember the moment he realized that strength wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was steady. Sometimes it was logistical. Sometimes it was a nation 3,000 miles away that could land an army on your island and make it look like a construction project. Years after the war, Rinaldi will tell his grandson that the turning point wasn't a single battle. It was a feeling. The feeling that no matter how hard you fought, the other side would simply replace what you destroyed. Knock out one tank, two more appeared. Destroy a bridge, by morning, another stood in its place. Capture a soldier, 10 more stepped forward. It wasn't heroism that broke them. It was math. On that Sicilian ridge at dawn, when the dust hung in the air and the Americans laughed beneath incoming shells, Rinaldi had glimpsed something the propaganda never prepared him for. Not softness, not decadence, but scale. And scale, once mobilized, becomes its own kind of inevitability. If this story shifts how you see the war in the Mediterranean, you're not alone. The battles weren't just about courage or cowardice. They were about systems colliding, industrial against traditional, abundance against scarcity. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Because the story of Sicily isn't just about one island in 1943. It's about what happens when a nation turns its entire economy into momentum. Until next time, remember, wars aren't always decided by the fiercest soldiers. Sometimes they're decided by who can build faster than the other side can break.